Dr. Denhardt wrote this on September 13th, that's what I referred to this morning, and I didn't pass them out. So these are
Today is 9/11.
they're working their way out.
We have three little things that are coming around, so I'll introduce those before I start into the regular presentation. The first is the September 11th statement. Janet and I were writing a regular column for the American Society for Public Administration.
I love it.
And had a column due on September the 12th. We had it all prepared, ready to go. And then September 11th happened. And we, of course, threw away the column that we had prepared and wrote this one. It was sort of one of those things that went viral on the internet and has gotten a lot of traction since then. So I thought it might be nice for you to see this. It's the single sheet that you just passed out. Second thing that's coming around is a brochure for the Executive Master of Leadership Program, which I happen to direct, and which Danielle is a student in, and I hope enjoying it. Thank you. That was set up. And the third thing that's coming around is the book, Just Plain Good Management, a little book that we've just published. And thank you. I don't have a copy. Danielle, would you mind reading page 43? Just to give people a sample of what's in there.
I don't know anything about this.
Somebody may.
Yes, dealing with jerks. Iambic pentameter. Every organization with more than 5 managers has at least one manager who is a jerk. Every organization that has more than 10 people has at least one employee who is a jerk. Most jerks don't recognize who they are, but they can be very disruptive and not in a good way. But remember that you may too easily label someone a jerk who is disgruntled for good reason. Meet them head on, learn the source of their anger, and, if possible, do something about it. Recovering jerks can actually become your strongest allies. And incidentally, if you are in a meeting with 4 other managers and don't recognize the jerk at the table, you know where this is going? Maybe it's time for a little self-examination.
I hope you enjoy that, and find not just page 43 useful. Let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing in the next hour or so. You're all here because you're leaders, and I suspect that, like most leaders, you want to improve your leadership skills. And that's exactly what we're about this morning. We've been studying leadership for a while, and it seems to me that there's one central question in leadership development, that if we can answer this question, we can begin to become more effective leaders. And that question is, what is it that leaders do that causes others to follow? We've come to think that there are certain essential skills of leadership, and if you can engage those essential skills, you'll become a more effective leader. I was talking with an Olympic basketball coach from Canada, and he said if you watch different basketball players taking a jump shot, they all look different. But if a physicist or engineer looked at trajectory and gravity and so forth, there's certain things that have to happen for the shot to be good. He said everything else is just personality. We think the same is true of leadership, that there's certain essential skills, but leaders don't look alike, they don't act alike. Some are men, some are women, some are old, some are young. All the rest is just personality. If they accomplish those essential skills, they will lead. So figuring out those essential skills and then becoming more skilled at those is a key to leadership development. Second, we don't always even know that we do these things. I have a friend who is actually a vice president with the Fruit of the Loom company, believe it or not. And she came to me and said, Bob, people are always complimenting me on my leadership, and and I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just being me. And I think that's right. For some people, there's a part of your personality that just fits with those essential skills of leadership. For others, you may not have those skills so naturally. But wherever you are, wherever you start out, you can improve those skills and become a more effective leader. So that's what we're all about this morning for the next hour or so. Now, I was talking about this presentation with my friend John Hall, and John knows that my students think that I'm a deadly serious guy, and so I told him about as much about this presentation as I just told you. And he said, Bob, that'll be fine, but you need something to spice things up a little bit. And he said, I have just the thing for you. And he gave me this set of puns. He said, just drop one of these in the conversation every now and then. He said, people will go, oh. Let's practice that, please. Oh. He said, they'll go, oh, but it will build community. And that's a good thing. So I have John's puns. I thought I'd try one out now. Two boll weevils grew up in South Carolina. One went to Hollywood and became a big star. The other stayed behind in the cotton fields and never amounted to much. The second one naturally became known as the lesser of two weevils. I actually heard a little laughter there. That's the first time anybody's ever laughed at that one. Let's think about leadership and the way that we define leadership. Leadership is a very Spanish topic right now, but it's very complicated because we don't really understand what leadership is. We know it when we see it, but we don't understand it exactly. We sometimes equate leadership with positions, executive positions, but we also know that people in those positions sometimes don't lead or don't lead effectively. We kind of equate leadership with power, but power can be actually antithetical to leadership. If you have to resort to power, maybe you're not leading. And so I think of leadership in quite a different way. I have a 29-word academic definition of leadership. That is, leadership occurs where one member of a group or organization stimulates others to more clearly recognize their previously latent needs, desires, and potentialities, and to work together toward their fulfillment. I have a one-word practical definition of leadership, and that is that leadership energizes. We've come to think that the energizing effect of leadership is what's essential to leadership. If you think about groups or teams that you work with, probably what happens is you sit around and talk back and forth for a while, and then somebody will say something that people pick up on, get energized by, and off you go. I would say at that moment, an act of leadership has occurred. That act of leadership doesn't have to be an act on the part of the formal leader. In fact, there may not even be a formal leader in that situation. But where the group is energized, I would say leadership has occurred. So look for the energizing effect, and I think you'll see leadership. But we can ask, of course, how that comes about. Let's go back to another way of thinking about leadership, and that is to contrast leadership with management. This is often the confusing part of talking about leadership as well. And let me engage you in this. Let me ask you to turn to just the people sitting next to you and think about management and leadership. What are the things that you would associate with management? What are the things you associate with leadership? You might think of pairs of words. Leadership is this, management is this. Leaders do this, managers do that. Just take a couple of minutes to do that, and then we'll bring that back together and see what those differences are.
I'm a graduate of the School of Public Policy, and I worked in local government. I should have asked how many of you I'm meditating on that. I used to ask this question in interviews, is what is the difference between a leader and a manager?
A leader takes the initiative. A manager works with what is given to them. Am I correct?
That's what I practice. I think one of the answers as a manager, people can be promoted to be a manager.
Yes.
That doesn't mean you're on the initiative.
No, that's right, that's right. Because leadership takes initiative, takes creativity. You have to think of what might happen and then you start it. You know, management is you do what's already there and you try to keep it together. Wow.
I always remember that. Remember, going into my first interview, it's kind of like,
I wonder how many real graduates of this school and
I don't think
because it used to be mostly for men and mostly for real estate.
I was one of the first women in the graduate program. It was also a lot of police officers because there was legal funds at the time that allowed them to do it. Because my undergraduate, I both my undergrad and my graduate degree was public administration, and the undergrad was actually through the School of Letters, Arts, and Sciences.
Yeah, I'm in Illinois, and we have to create not only depend on collective, we have to what would our audience like to read and do research with, and this is where we brought up taking initiative in purchasing research resources that our faculty need and use. Once in a while I need their input because of the highly specialized things in engineering and science, but otherwise we have to take the initiative. The faculty are too busy, they say, so you provide me with what I need, you figure out what I need, so that's where we have to take and manage our budget. Here's where management and leadership go together. Yes,
people.
exactly.
But
Staff.
that doesn't make you a leader.
No, but you have to have leadership to create.
And to be a better manager too.
Okay.
I feel like as a teenager,
I hate to cut off the conversation so quickly. Some of the differences between management and leadership. Volunteers. I'm a teacher. I call on people, so you might as well just volunteer. Go ahead. Yeah.
I have here a graduate of your school who has the leadership thing.
All right.
She said she was one of the first women in the School of Public Policy.
Wonderful.
And it used to be that we used to, I worked in local government for 32 years. And in interviews, one of the questions we always asked some of our people going into management positions was, what is the difference between being a leader and a manager?
And what did they say?
A lot of them failed the question.
What was the right answer?
The right answer is that what we're looking for is that a lot of people can become managers just through a series of promotions, but that doesn't make you a leader. To be a leader, it takes an extra set of, to have initiative and to have drive and to have that innate ability to work with people on a higher level. Manager is just you're dealing with your people and your resources, but it doesn't make you a leader.
Okay, I agree with that. Yes.
We were talking, I like your little saying, you have to say it, but a manager is more task oriented. We need to get this done, but we have to do it. A leader has to be more innovative, maybe. But what's your little saying?
Task oriented versus more innovative. What else?
I've heard this in the past, that a good manager does the right, a good manager does things right, and a good leader does the right things.
Right. That's often attributed to Warren Bennis, who, of course, taught here for many years.
I think a good leader is a good motivator.
Yeah.
I'd say a good leader also has a longer-term perspective and vision.
Long-term perspective with the leader, maybe a shorter term with the manager. Is that the other half of
Bigger
it?
picture. Yeah.
Bigger picture. You've had some bad experiences with managers, haven't you?
Oh, we were just going to say, management, they follow what they're told, whereas leadership, they execute plans.
Good. One more, yes.
I think a leader has to inspire. It has to inspire and make your team feel ownership of what your whole picture is. And the manager can maybe break it down into component parts. Excellent.
Did you hear that? I really like that because it sounds very much like a definition I once heard about leadership. Leadership energizes. That's great. You have some wonderful. Let me go to some others that I've heard before. This is one that I like. The managers want to know how many seeds are in the apple. The the leaders want to know how many apples are in the seed.
Interesting.
And here's a set that another group did. These are really hard to read, aren't they? If you can figure out this, they're okay? Okay. Leaders are inspirational, managers are motivational. Leaders are persuading, managers are delegating. Leaders are creative, managers are mechanical. Leaders look at the possibilities, managers look at the probabilities. Leaders have a concern for people, managers have a concern for products. Look at the ones on the right-hand side under leadership. How many of those are rocket science? How many of those are higher mathematics, lower mathematics? How many of those are science at all? How about we do this? You know how the applause meter goes. Here's the applause meter. When it goes this way, if you think leadership is a science, applaud. When it goes this way, if you think leadership is an art, applaud. So here we go. If you think leadership is a science, you should be applauding now. And if you think leadership is an art, well, I agree with you. Here's the definition of art: conscious use of skill and creative imagination. That sounds like leadership, and I couldn't resist the second one. Conscious use of skill and creative imagination, and that sounds like leadership to me. And what about this definition from a prominent leader? Leadership is the art of accomplishing more than the science of management says is possible.
Bravo.
Now, my wife Janet and I have taught leadership and management for a long time. And we've always thought that people in leadership positions said leadership is an art, but people who wrote about leadership, some of my colleagues, took it as a science rather than an art. And so we wanted to find out what would happen if we really took seriously the notion of leadership as an art. So we first talked with dancers, choreographers, and other musicians and artists, not about how they lead in their field, but about how they approach their own disciplines. So we talked with, if you know the world of dance, we talked with Liz Lerman of the Liz Lerman Dance Company. We talked with David Parsons. Are we ringing any bells yet? We talked with Septime Weber of the Washington Ballet, who's one of the most innovative choreographers of our time, I think. Again, I asked them about how they approach their disciplines. We wanted to translate those ideas into leadership, and that was fairly easy for us to do, we thought. We did a second round of interviews with prominent leaders. Leaders in business. We talked with the CEO of Motorola, the CEO of Kodak, Honeywell Aerospace. We talked with leaders in politics, governors, mayors. We talked with leaders in the military, a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, an astronaut, space shuttle commander, and even some leaders in athletics. And we kind of tried out these artistic ideas about leadership on them. And what they would tend to say was, yeah, I kind of get that. I wouldn't have put it that way, but now that you do, I understand things that I've always thought about intuitively, and I have a vocabulary to use to understand and to talk about those ideas. So they got it. And so we went back then to that initial question that we started out with this morning. What is it that leaders do that causes others to follow? And we concluded that leaders connect with us emotionally in a way that energizes us and moves us to act. Leaders connect with us emotionally in a way that energizes us and causes us to act. And leaders provide the assurance that we need to pursue important values. You know that change is very hard for some people. It's hard because it typically involves shifting values. And leaders can help provide the support that we need to get through times of shifting values and change. So I'd like for us to talk about three topics in the art of leadership: rhythm and timing, communicating in images, symbols, and metaphors, and focus, concentration, passion, and discipline. And we'll start with rhythm and timing. you probably don't ordinarily think of your leadership activities or your activities in organizations that you're part of in terms of rhythm and timing. But I'd like to ask you to take a few minutes and try to explore those activities using the language of rhythm and timing, and come up with some examples of how rhythm and timing apply to the work that you're doing in groups, organizations, societies, wherever it is that you act as a leader. What are the elements of rhythm and timing that you experience? Okay? Let's just have a little conversation about that, and then we'll bring that back together.
Except like in my responsibility, I don't call it a job. I think the rhythm and the timing, it's not just in case, it's just in time. We provide things for our students, not just in case they need, but just in time as they need it. That is where I have built my, we don't,
It's your own personal.
yes.
Setting the pace.
Yes, and reacting. Yes, yeah. For example, when we don't have something, we have some service called recommend a book. They don't have it, tell us. And the people who do that, they say you have to select. You have 30 days. 30 days? Are you kidding me? By the time I order it, it comes half of the semester is over. So I do it immediately. And yesterday I trained a new librarian. I told her, forget about it. And we have another leap, writing expert and position. That's what probably one of the students. They should give you 24 hours. I do it at night before I go to sleep, otherwise I worry. So this is where you have to give it rhythm and timing and mean something. And that's part of leadership, taking responsibility and proactive. So apparently you'll be a real graduate. Nobody else said I am too.
Yes. I mean, it was, but not
I recognized those students, they were a certain right. They were all girls. When there were 120 students, only 3 were girls. Times have changed, yes, they have changed. And they told me now it is more than 50% because I said, what is the percentage? They said 46 to men and which means 54 women. Can you imagine? 70.
it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Very good thing.
Yes.
My daughter's a senior here right now.
What is she studying?
She's going to be a teacher.
What? Good for her. I have a son who was not there. He taught for 8 years. And he decided to do tutoring. And guess who is one of the tutors? Rosemary's girl. And I said, so Michael, is your son?
Back together. In 5, 4,
He is tutoring science, math, and music.
Again, I hate to interrupt good discussions, but time is short. Some examples of rhythm and timing in your experience. Yes.
So one of the things that I do is help to run a youth theater group. And it's all about the rhythm and timing, from auditions to callbacks to starting rehearsals to building the sets to, and there's a specific order that things have to go until the very last show. So it's, that's totally 100% applies to our
Perfect. And it's probably a cycle that continues once you're finished at this end.
3 times a year. Yeah.
Start over and keep going. Yeah, good. Let me put this up. That triggers this exactly. In relation to organization, rhythm may be considered a process by which events and time are marked off, related, and organized. Without it, all would be confusion. Excellent, excellent. Another way that you experience rhythm and timing. Yes.
If you are having difficulty within the leadership would not be the time to offer a new project. You have to, people have to be in a good, positive mood about the organization before you launch anything.
Okay. So you have to understand the feeling, the dynamics, the culture of the group before launching change projects. And I've worked with people who are in local government, and they would often say, politicians often say, timing is everything, right? Timing is everything. If timing is everything, you would think that it would be in the literature on leadership. I have never seen anything about timing in that literature. And I think that's because timing is an art, and that literature is more social science. But it's very important. So timing, excellence. Excellent, yes?
I think it's interesting we're all related to USC here, and realizing it's an academic institution, which is totally on a schedule, an academic calendar. And even like, I was talking, we're interfacing with a colleague about, move-in week, and that's when recruitment's going on, and scheduling. You're not gonna get an email back from somebody most likely during those, that time, or just other times when the university's super busy,
Well, the schedule that you had up here earlier, that's a good example of how you cycle through things.
Right.
You said just as you finish this, we start on this. Good. Another example? How many of you? Yes.
I think when the rhythm is really fast, when you're going through and you're getting all your things done, you're kind of plowing ahead and getting through it. So you need that slower time when you can just kind of absorb what you're doing and maybe be creative and think of new things to do. So you can't keep going at either a slow or a long or a fast pace all the time.
Yeah.
It's good to have something.
The first thing that we asked the leaders that we talked with was, what's different about your work today from when you started maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago? And almost to the person, they said, work today is faster paced than it was before. And you've probably all experienced that fast pace. The CEO of what was it? Motorola Aerospace, I think, said, it's my job to take this company around the curve as fast as we can go without falling off the cliff. And he said something that I thought was interesting after that. He said, if I'm going around the curve in my Ferrari, footnote, he has a Ferrari. His Ferrari was in a big picture on his wall, his office. And Tiger Woods was standing beside him and beside the Ferrari. Okay, that's just if I'm going around the curve in my Ferrari and everybody else is going around the curve in a beat up old Chevrolet, it's not going to work because we have to all get there together. I thought that was a nice insight. But to your point, another corporate vice president said when her division was moved from one company to another, she said, the pace is different here. It's much slower, but that's good. It's improved the quality of our work and the quality of our work life. So she was very happy to have that change in rhythm. Speaking of changes in rhythm, have you been in an organization where there was a leader with a steady rhythm that everybody was comfortable with, and then a new leader comes in and has a completely different rhythm? Yes? Most people nodded that with pained faces. Let's think about what happens in that situation. And I want to try to use some music to illustrate this one. You did very well with that, actually. Compared with other groups that I've seen who just kind of like that. That was very good. What happens when you encounter a rhythm that you are not familiar with? How does it feel?
Awkward.
You're out of sync. Feels awkward, confused, frustrated. You look for leadership. You looked up here, and when I put my hands down, you got mad at me. So all of those things happen when a new leader comes in with a rhythm that's completely different from the rhythm that you're accustomed to. That happened at another university where I worked a few years ago. There was a well-established president who had a rhythm that was very embracing and even-tempered and sort of low-key. The new president came in and was just, full steam ahead, all the cliches that you could think of. And it pretty much drove people up the wall. What they were saying was not different. Their ideas were not that different. But what they did, rhythmically, was different. Faculty sort of just went about their thing. But the administrative people at the university, this guy drove them crazy. Now you'll have to look at my bio to figure out where I've been and figure out who that was. That's in the Pac-12. Okay. You did so well with that, I'm going to reward you with another fun. Did you hear about the Buddhist who refused Novocaine during a root canal? He wanted to transcend dental medication.
That's good.
What a wonderful audience. Okay. Rhythm and timing. Rhythm and timing are important for leadership because, as we said, leadership is about energizing, and you energize people through connecting with them emotionally. Rhythm and timing are primary emotional connections. Rhythm is very much entrained in everything that we do, from our heartbeat to the pace of our walk to gestures like these. So being attuned to rhythm and timing can actually help you a great deal as a leader because it helps you make an emotional connection with the people that you're working with. So let's look at another topic, communicating in images, symbols, and metaphors. Images, symbols, and metaphors are indeed the language of art, of music. Images, symbols, and metaphors communicate what's primary about any of the arts. And it turns out they're essential to leadership too. Let's start though with an example of metaphor. I want to play a song that I think is just dripping with metaphor, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. It may be hard to pick up words. I'll read through them after it's finished. Sorry. Angels wept into their wings. She loved him most when his eyes were gray, the paler shade of a winter day. They filled her with a raging fire and a bittersweet desire. She shined for him like candlelight that softly beckoned in the night. But he said no right to her face, then simply turned and walked away. All heaven watched from way on high, true love given and denied. And while her heart was broken and bleeding, sorrowful angels wept into their wings. Don't cry. I say that's just dripping with metaphor, and you can just feel it. Now, whether leaders need quite that much metaphor, you wonder, but in fact, we've encountered some leaders in circumstances that you wouldn't expect would use symbols and metaphors like that. We talked, for example, with Phil Fulmer, who was football coach at the University of Tennessee a time ago. And he told us about the 1998 season when his team was playing very well, but he thought they could do better. One day as they were going out on the practice field, a friend of his who knew that he liked to walk brought him this beautifully carved walking stick. So he carried it on out to the practice field. And his players kind of got after him, saying, "You look like old man Moses out there today." He said, "I went home and thought about it and decided I was going to do something with this walking stick." So the next day, he gathered the team together before the practice, and it was clear the way they were seated that something new was happening. He said, "You were teasing me yesterday about being Old Man Moses. But remember that Old Man Moses led his people to the Promised Land. The Promised Land for us is a national championship. And this stick is going to be the symbol of our quest for the national championship. We're going to call it the synergy stick." And he gave it to the linebackers one day, to the defensive ends another day, shifted around. He said it became the first thing on the bus, first thing off the bus. And in fact, Tennessee Volunteers got to the Fiesta Bowl that year and defeated Florida State for the national championship. And Fulmer, at the time that I interviewed him, still had the synergy stick in a beautiful display in the corner of his office. He said that was the symbol of our national championship. Now, for a football coach to do that kind of symbolism and metaphor may say that any leader can do so. But let's think about some other ways in which leaders use symbolism. I like the difference between normal speaking and listening and empathetically listening and emotional speaking. Empathetic listening is listening for and understanding the subtle nuances of sound and movement that reflect a person's inner state. Have you gone up to somebody and said, "How are you doing?" They say, "Good." And you say, "What's wrong?" You picked up something about what's inside them. It caused you to say, "What's wrong?" That's empathetic listening. Evocative speaking is even more interesting to me. Skillfully using image-based words and metaphors that evoke an emotional response in those that hear you. There are, in fact, content-based words and image-based words. You can talk about work, or you can talk about sweat. You can say someone's dependable, or you can say they're like a rock. You can say, "Consider this," or you can say, "Listen." You can say something is agreeable, or something is so weak. And I've learned that's a 2-syllable word. Practice, so weak. Alternative, or say we take a new path.
Sweet.
So weak. Let's produce something or grow a new venture, a new endeavor, or a journey. It turns out that leaders, in fact, use more image-based words than others do. And that's in part why they're so effective in an emotional reaction to people that they're talking with. And remember, that's at the heart of energizing folks. John Coltrane, the jazz saxophonist, said, "The main thing a musician would like to do is give a picture to the listener of the many wonderful things he knows of and senses in the universe." Give a picture to the listener. Improvisation also kind of fits in this area. We don't think of leaders as improvising, but in fact they do all the time. You pick up the phone, you don't know who's on the other end, you start talking and you're improvising. You meet someone in the parking lot and start improvising, all within the context of what you know and what you want to communicate, what you're improvising at the moment. Let me share a story about improvisation. I was with my family in the Rocky Mountains, Colorado, a few years ago, and the rest of them wanted to do something I wasn't particularly interested in. So my wife very nicely said, "Bob, why don't you just go off for the morning and do whatever you want to do, and we'll meet you at noon at such and such a place." Okay, what I'd really like to do is find a place in the woods somewhere and just practice my banjo. And so, okay, goodbye. And I start out from Breckenridge toward Keystone. Some of you may know that area. It's called, I think, Swan Mountain. I saw a sign that said Overlook. This is promising. So I stopped the car, got out my banjo. My camera was there too, so I took that. Walked down to the Overlook. Absolutely beautiful spot. Lake Dillon is sort of wrapped around this way. Mountains, snow-capped mountains with all of the evergreens all around. I took some pictures and sat down and started playing the banjo. After a little while, a guy wearing a coat and tie and carrying a briefcase comes down the walkway. And he says, "Hello, are you here for the wedding?"
Yes.
Do I look like I'm here for the wedding?
Yes, I'm practicing.
Yeah. He said, "Well, I'm Judge so-and-so, and I was asked to come perform a wedding ceremony for this lovely couple." And so I said, "I don't know anything about that." And he walked back up the path. I started playing again. He came back down with the couple, and you could tell from the way that they were talking and laughing that he'd already told them there was some fool down there playing the banjo where they wanted to get married. And so I said, "I'll just go away somewhere, y'all." He said, the couple said, "No, why don't you stay and play for us? This wedding is funny already. Why don't you just play?" So I did. I played all the wedding songs I knew. I played the Ballad of Jed Clampett. I played Party Mountain Breakdown. I thought about playing Your Cheating Heart. And then they stood up for the ceremony. I realized my camera was there. I said, "Can I take some pictures?" Yeah. Okay, so I became wedding photographer. And when it was over, I signed the paper as the witness and got their name and address. I put together an album of pictures. And these were the best pictures I'd ever taken in my life. I was so happy. Sent it to them. A totally improvised moment. But the kind of moment that stays with you and still today carries an emotional impact I can feel it. So improvisation is very important because it connects people in the moment. And it's not just that you're doing something for the first time, you're doing it against a background of experience. But, just as improvising on the piano is not just banging on the piano. You have to have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of practice. And then you can improvise. So improvisation is a very important part of leadership, we think. Sidney Bechet, who's a jazz clarinetist, said if you know in advance every note you're going to play, just the way you're going to play it, there's no need to have feelings. Music like that, you could almost make a machine play it for you. And here's another piece of this puzzle. Martha Grimm says if a plain walk is right and expresses everything that is to be expressed, then more than a walk would be wrong. Leaders have the capacity to take complex material and say it in a very simple and straightforward and meaningful fashion. That's not to say they're simplistic. It is to say they're able to take a lot of material and boil it down to what is most essential. Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. One of the CEOs we talked with said, managers make things more complex, leaders make things simple. And here's an illustration that I love. Students of art history, you know this painting, right? Go ahead, show off and tell me who did it. Yes, Rembrandt's The Night Watch. We saw this painting in Amsterdam a few years ago, and it was displayed in a way that it was at the end of a long, long corridor, probably 100, 125, 150 feet long. It's a huge painting. It's about the size of, say, the rest of the wall over here. Big. And it always has been interesting to me how an artist, Rembrandt in this case, could apply all of these brush strokes at arm's length and yet create a painting that's best seen from maybe 50 feet back. I think that's what managers do, what leaders do. That is, they have in mind the big picture that they want to accomplish, but their transactions are largely at arm's length. They run into somebody in the elevator and they have a conversation. They talk around a conference table. Everything they say is in a different circumstance, but it all is a brushstroke that leads to that big picture that they're trying to create. One of my favorite sayings these days is The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I was just conscious that I can't say the word T-H-I-N-G without calling up my Kentucky accent, can I? Thing. The main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Okay. I just can't wait for this. I have another point. A woman has twins and gives them up for adoption. One of them was adopted by a family in Egypt, and they named him Amal. The other was adopted by a family in Spain, and they named him Juan. Years later, I've got to get this right, Juan sent a picture of himself to his birth mother. She told her husband, "I wish I had a picture of Amal." And her husband said, "You've seen Juan. If you've seen Juan, you've seen Amal." If you've seen Juan, you've seen Amal. I didn't even hear a groan that time. That's wonderful. Okay, focus, concentration, passion, and discipline. When we talk with dancers and choreographers, one question we asked was, what is the difference between a good dancer and a great dancer? And to our surprise somewhat, it wasn't technique. They said at that level, everyone has superb technique. But the answer was, it's the ability to concentrate. They've used the phrase, be present to the moment. I don't know where that phrase comes from, but dancers talk about that a lot. Be present to the moment. Be right there in what's going on at the moment. Martha Graham again says, acquiring nervous, physical, and emotional concentration is the one element possessed by the truly great dancers. That's why there are so few great dancers. This is not analyzing what you're doing as you're doing it. In fact, it's emptying yourself of analysis and doing what's important. The figure skating gold medalist Scott Hamilton reported that just before he went on the ice for his final performance, a friend said, "Skate stupid." And that wasn't skate comma stupid. It was empty your head of everything and just do what you've been practicing all these years to do. And he did, and he won the gold medal. Yogi Berra said it this way, how can you think and hit at the same time? There's a sense of flow that dancers, choreographers talk about, and that leaders talk about as well. It's that feeling that things are just comfortable, they're going along beautifully, you're able to do things you don't even know how to do. There was another Olympic figure skater whose name I need help with. She was in about 3 Olympics back and won the gold medal, and her name is, help me. Not that far back. Hughes.
Sarah.
Sarah Hughes. Thank you. When she did her gold medal performance, they kept the camera and microphone on her as she talked with her coach. And she said, among other things, I did things out there today I don't know how to do. So into that sense of flow. City manager in Harrington, Kansas, of all places, gave me a similar story. He said, we had visitors in town to talk about relocating the plant. We had a meal at a old railroad car converted to a steakhouse. And then I got up to do my thing, and Bob, I was better than I know how to be. Better than I know how to be. That sense of flow. Mike Scott has a jazz club in London. This is design. He talks about happy conjunction of conditions and events and attitudes. I feel like that I should be what I am kind of thing. I couldn't resist putting a little dance piece in today. Dancing, especially at the professional level
Oh, no wonder.
is extraordinarily difficult. Baryshnikov says, nobody's born to be a dancer. You have to want it more than anything. The desire to be a dancer is the discipline of a career, and your work is the language of that discipline. Balanchine says it more correctly. First comes the sweat, then comes the beauty. As we were doing our interviews, we had the opportunity to see some marvelous dance performances. But one of those was actually a rehearsal of the Washington Ballet. We had lunch with Septine Weber, the choreographer, artistic director. And then he asked if we wanted to come over and see the afternoon rehearsal. We said, wow, Washington Ballet, yes. And there were about 15 people in the company that were working on a piece that day. And I mean, we were seated, I mean, it was a stage-sized room with all that you would expect, with the mirrors, the bar, and so forth. And there were feet kicking up this close to us. And you see some things and hear some things when you're that close that you don't see or hear in the audience that night. You see how hard they're working. They finish a little segment and just come off gasping with breath. You see that they're damaged. Almost everybody had adhesive tape somewhere. Elbows, wrists, ankles. They've all been hurt. The other thing that you hear is bodies splashing together. You don't hear that, but they really make a noise. They went through the company rehearsal, and then the young man and the young woman, maybe something like this, wanted to practice a piece a duet they've been working on. So they went through this beautiful lyrical early part, and then he was over in that corner, she was over here, and she came running across the stage and did kind of a Superman leap into his arms. He caught her and they finished the piece. There was something that they wanted to work on, and so they did it again. Went through the beautiful lyrical part. She was over here, he was over here. She ran across, did the leap, and this time something was wrong. I think maybe his elbow caught her in here somewhere. She just went down in this little clump on the floor and stayed there for the longest time. People came running out. What's wrong? Is it this? Is it this? And she just lay there. Finally somebody said, can you stand up? She got up to about here. They said, can you stretch? She got to about here. And they said, okay, let's do it again. And they started the beautiful lyrical piece and got to the place that she was over here, he was over here. She was running, and I swear it was faster than either of the previous two times. She did a higher leap than previously. He caught her, and everything was okay. We learned something about passion and discipline and resilience at that moment. And I know occasionally as leaders, you sort of get knocked to the floor and are able to get back into the game that you're a part of too. So a wonderful lesson about the commitment that they and you have. So let me summarize a couple of points. Leadership is concerned with the flow of energy that moves people to do things together. Flow of social energy is mostly stimulated by feelings and emotions. Where that happens, people, groups, organizations, and societies are energized. So we actually get back around to where we started out. That is leadership energizing. And I want to end with a couple of quotations, and I'll let some music play for this. We must be willing to take risks, committed to the experience, and ready to be vulnerable and open to the self-discovery as a natural product of the process. We must be willing to listen to others and to be generous with them. An active balance of self-fulfillment and response to others' needs has to be maintained. Basically, we need the courage to our own impulses and responses, qualified only by healthy concern for the people we're working with. I think this is a beautiful quotation that should go on every leader's wall. Turns out it's not about leadership. It came directly from an introductory dance textbook. We must use power to empower others. We must change behaviors while staying in touch with existing values. Our logic must be guided by our intuition. We must act as though we're in charge and be aware that we're not. This creative vision of the future already exists in the minds of others. So that's it.